Hello, my name is Daniel Diaz Vidal. I'm an assistant professor of economics at the University of Tampa, and I'm going to be talking to you about a paper I am writing titled The New Era of Teaching Using Video Games to Teach Macroeconomics. The game we're going to be discussing, the specific game that I use in my Introduction to Macroeconomics classes, is Civilization 6. The Civilization series has 6 editions. The latest one is the one I use in my classes. And Civilization is a very complicated and dense game that requires or that has a very steep learning curve for the students. Deeper games that are immersive and that have a lot of layers to them require quite a bit of learning, but also provide deep learning of the underlying concepts that the simulation is trying to get at. In this simulation, what the game is trying to accomplish is to recreate the birth and progress of a civilization over the past 6 millennia. So all sorts of variables are taken under consideration. Wars can happen. Players have to establish cities or new settlements near resources. There's rivers, there's the sea, there are mountains, each have different characteristics. There's trade within the empire or the civilization of the player, but also with other players and their civilizations. So there's religion, there's politics, there's a large number of intricate layers of meaning and variables that actually relate to how reality and human history has taken place in the last 6,000 years. In that sense, what the game is an economic, social, and political, in a sense, simulator or model that we can apply. Now, what I try to do in my classes is to get my students to realize how the game tries to model reality. We discuss then how that relates to the theories and to the concepts we learn in class, which would be taught in any traditional class of macroeconomics, Introduction to Macroeconomics. And then we can use the game to, as the students have seen how the theories relate to the fictional world within the game, we use that to create discussions in class to relate both the game and the theories to reality. Basically, what the students get with this use of civilization in the classroom is an opportunity to learn by experience. They actually hands-on decide what technologies a particular civilization is going to, research or concentrate on, which resources, who they're going to trade with, whether or not they're going to trade. So you can become autocratic, you can close yourself from the rest of the world and learn soon enough that that is a terrible idea. The idea is also they have to reflect on what they're doing. So we have constant discussions, active learning discussions in which higher order questions. For example, we bring actual gameplay from each one of the students and myself to the classroom, and we discuss what was happening in this situation. What does this relate to? How does this relate to human capital accumulation? I'm going to give a number of examples now with screenshots of actual gameplay in which you see how the students, players, have to make real decisions that will affect the economic growth and the economic development of their civilization, which ultimately will have an incredible effect on other political, social, and warlike, dimensions of human life. It is important to note that this simulation is not just about economics, but that is actually beautiful because the students see how important the economy of your empire or your civilization is in determining success in any of the other fields. If you want to build a big cathedral and you want to focus on religion, to develop a very successful religion within the game, well, you have to have the resources to be able to do that. Without a powerful economy, that is going to be impossible. Okay, so this is what the game actually looks like. And I chose this screenshot of gameplay because it shows us various things. We have on the left-hand side 3 hexagons of sugar. At the very top, we have 2 of rice, and we see 2 little rice bowls there. And we also have horses, right, which is another one of the resources. We also see there's a hexagon in the middle that has trees, and that has different characteristics, different payoffs for the player. So the player has to decide which one of the hexagons are its citizens going to work. And also, the player can also invest capital in a particular hexagon. So on the 2 on the left-hand side, you see that one is undeveloped sugar, and the one on top has a plantation built on top of it. With the plantation, you get extra income and extra food out of the hexagon. So that allows the students to realize how important human capital is for this. Later on in the game, it also becomes relevant that if you don't have troops, which is what we have on the right-hand side of this screenshot, if you don't have troops to defend your hexagons, then if your property rights are not protected, then it's not really worth it to invest in capital. So in the early game, it is not advisable to overinvest in the hexagons if you really can't defend them, which is also a very good lesson for long-run economic growth. On the right-hand side, as we said, you have these troops, right? On the bottom right-hand side, you have a band of warriors, and on top of them, you have legionnaires. To convert warriors into legionnaires, first you have to develop a technology, and then you have to train them to become legionnaires. This is very important because students sometimes can get confused between technology and human capital accumulation. The advance of being able to organize as a legion is a feat of technological progress. Training people to become a legion is an investment in human capital. The fact that the students can do this, they do this throughout the game with very different types of units. They can train all sorts of citizens. And the fact that they can develop infrastructures both within the cities and in the hexagons surrounding them is extremely powerful because they're actually experience how physical and human capital improves yields. How from one hexagon, one citizen goes from producing just a little bit of food and gold to producing a lot more. The game is extremely good at showing how productivity increases throughout human history and how therefore well-being also increases through human history. The players can actually see how the cities have become modernized. And on top of that, as the game becomes, as you pass through the ages and you get to modern times, then many of the citizens that you have in your cities do not have to work the land anymore. They can now work at a library or at a university, so they get to be specialized labor. Why is that possible? Because you invested in human capital, because your hexagons, you get a lot more out of them because of physical capital and human capital. Again, it's an extremely powerful tool to teach basic concepts in economics. As I mentioned in the previous slide, it is also very important to note the role that technology plays in the game. If you want to train archers, you have to research that technology, archery. Writing allows you to construct libraries. Irrigation allows you to build plantations and farms, etc. Sailing, for example, if you invest in that, well, you're going to have, biremes, so a particular type of wartime vessel. And you're also going to be able to exploit maritime resources like fish, like oysters, like crab, and other things that are present in the game. This is extremely valuable. And again, it is very important to highlight the idea that one thing is to invest in technology, and a different one is to actually develop human capital through that technological progress. And this game makes it very clear for the students, and they also see the importance of technological innovations. Furthermore, there is a strong connection in the game between technology and trade. and the connection with other civilizations. If you start the game in an isolated island, you may do great for the first 1,000 years, but eventually you realize that these guys are coming over to your shores with cannons and galleons, right? And you don't have that technology. That is because you have been isolated from the rest of the world. When you actually trade with the rest of the world, you get more money, your capacity to buy infrastructures that are going to allow you to grow faster also increase. Your population increases faster because you trade your resources, you get money, and build farms that produce more food, so your population grows. Technology works with points. You have to add points, and those are determined by the amount of population and then by certain buildings. The more universities and research campuses that you have and more libraries, the more technological points you get. And also, you can work later on in the advanced game. You can work technology by placing specialized citizens that do not work any hexagons, any of those tiles surrounding the city. They work in the university or in the research center, and they produce science. As we mentioned, another very important dimension of the game are institutions and government stability. As you progress in the game, not only can you create new technologies, but you have a civics tree in which you develop new ways of organizing your society. Amongst the civics sort of innovations that you can create are different forms of government that each have some benefits and some costs. So there are trade-offs to all these different types of policies. As you progress, though, they become more nuanced, and therefore democracy versus communism, both of them, trade-off is better than thinking about a classical republic versus an oligarchy. So that's how the game rewards sort of an advanced and a more nuanced way of organizing and a more modern way of organizing a society. Transitioning from one type of government to the next will have some costs in games and will create unhappiness within your citizens, so you cannot constantly be changing government. That is fantastic to explain to the students the importance of government stability. And furthermore, these institutions that you create have actual effects on the game. So you can you can create institutions in the game that promote your military, others that promote your economy. And this can be very much related to the way the actual world works. And it is very powerful for the students to see how the concepts and theories that we discuss when we talk about long-run growth and the underlying determinants of economic growth, of which Professor North would say institutions are a major part, how those both play a major role in the game, but also in the real world. It is also powerful towards the end of the year, once students have become more acquainted with the game and with the class, to use inductive reasoning to make sure they understand or to kind of criticize the game and some of the theories that we discuss in class. So actually using real data and statistics and inductive reasoning to shed light on, well, which one was more important, human capital or physical capital? Which one does the game give more importance? Those kinds of conversations can be had and should be had at the end of the semester, so that the experiential learning experience is truly reflective, so that the students actually reflect upon what they are doing it from a critical standpoint. I believe the game allows students to understand that interrelated nature of economic variables and social variables. It allows them to see what effect it would have if you became an autocracy, what effect it would have in your economy is you completely neglected one of the dimensions that are important for economic growth. So if you concentrated fully on one thing but forgot completely about another, what would that do to your game and to your success in the game? The game is extremely powerful in making students see how their actions and how macroeconomic policy and institutions can develop a successful or an unsuccessful long-term growth path for your civilization. And I therefore highly recommend it, particularly for our new generations of students that love this medium, that do not like to sit back and listen, but actually want to be an integral part of the learning process. This is a very powerful tool, and of course, I actually warn them not to become addicted to video games through this. And I actually think that this helps because they're seeing the game in a different light. It's no longer a game. They're starting to understand it as an economic and social model. And I think that changes the relationship they have with video games. They have a more mature intellectual connection with video games after the class.